Okay, tonight's topic, Black traditionalism versus Black liberation. And I have in parentheses, revolution. I wanted to say African traditionalism originally because I think that's the main issue that we're up against in the particular conscious community. But I want to say Black traditionalism because I think it reaches a larger portion of the Black community because there's so many traditions that we have within our community. And the problem is not having traditions, because I'm sure everything that we do can fit into some type of tradition. And the things that we do today will become traditions tomorrow. So I don't think we can ever escape having some type of traditions. Some of us have traditions that only last for 1 year. There are traditions that are only a year old. Traditions that are only a few years old. So they're going to be traditions. But I think the problem is when we are more traditional, when our focus is more on tradition than it is on revolution, than it is on change, than it is on Black liberation. Many of us want to go back to Africa and get back into our African culture. That's traditionalism. We want to find out what our old traditions were before slavery, not realizing that many of these traditions did not save us from slavery or were not very effective with dealing with the change, the radical shift that we were up against. So we outgrew many of those traditions. And we've learned to understand how many of those traditions were unnecessary and some not even effective. But the conscious community can only go in two ways. And Black change, if we just want to call it change in the overall Black community, it can only move in two directions. There's only two places it can go. The conscious community can either go in towards revolution or towards revisitation of tradition. Whether those traditions are 6,000 years old, 30,000 years old, 300,000 years, or whether those traditions are 400 years, or if those traditions are just 100 years. You're only going in two directions. Revolution, which is liberation, or traditionalism. If you don't accept one, you'll end up in the other. The traditionalists don't so much care about overall change for the Black community as a whole, social and political and humanitarian change for Black people in the world. The traditionalists' main focus is the implementation of tradition, the revisitation of traditions, the exaltation of traditions. That's their main focus. To get back into the tradition of. They care more about that than they care about the people. Then they care about our social condition. Then they care about true liberation or consciousness. Their consciousness can only take them so high, and that's the tradition. They start off studying this, studying that, getting information, waking their mind up, that they end up in either some Masonic traditionalism, they call it the craft, or they end up in some Ifa, or they end up in some Yoruba, or they end up practicing traditions that are on the wall in ancient Kemet. What you call ancient traditions. Or they end up with Hebrew Israelites, and they either practicing the traditions of those people who created the Hebrew Israelite culture in America, or they trying to follow the traditions of ancient Israel by living according to the Torah to their highest capacity. So they're following one tradition or another, the traditions of Kemet, the traditions of Israel. And then we just have Afrocentric traditions within the so-called conscious community where it's not Yoruba Ifa, it's our own traditions that we made up, like Kwanzaa, our libation ceremonies, our lectures, the way we perceive elders, the way we distribute information, disseminate and store information, the way we gather, our vending tables, what we distribute, how we dress. traditions. We have these traditions that we are just trying to keep going, and it became versus a massive movement. It turns into a small group of people that just trying to keep a tradition going. And it's more about keeping the tradition going than it's about waking the masses of the people up and causing a radical shift in the consciousness of our people. Our traditionalism goes beyond just the conscious community. It goes into the Black community, and we have traditions that are holidays, where we want to celebrate the holidays or holidays when they come up. The tradition of Christmas, the tradition of Thanksgiving. We have the tradition of Black History Month. We have traditions that are going on right now. And we're caught up into those traditions. That's why we can't respond to the violence or the mayhem or the destruction of our people. We can't respond to the genocide or the gentrification. We can't respond to how our people are dying or getting killed and murdered in the streets. We can't address these issues because we're trying to maintain the traditions that we have going on. Christianity has become a tradition. A lot of them don't even read the Bible. They don't know what the pastor is talking about. They go to church every Sunday and dress up, put their nice clothes on, and just sit in the front and listen to the gospel music. They're not really Christians. They're not really devoted. Their heart's not really, their mind is not with it. They don't comprehend or understand Christianity. They're just practicing traditionalism. It's just a traditional thing to do. We have traditions within a hood where it's a certain way you got to do things. In the hood, well, we have this traditional utopia where our tradition is a utopia where we want to go back to this time when, you know, it was less homosexuals in the community, and everybody went in before the street lights came on, and the people down the street, you know, if you did something wrong, that, you know, anybody in the neighborhood could whoop your ass and take you home to your parents. We want to bring back that tradition. Traditions we want to bring back. That we can be coming up against our own Armageddon or coming up against our own apocalypse with white supremacy, and all we can do is attach ourselves to traditions. With traditions, all we're trying to do is go back, get back to something over and over again. The whole idea of a Sankofa is a bird looking back, not forgetting where it came from, trying to return back from that which it came, and we look at that as a progressive idea. And we enslave the traditions. We have a lot of views of how we view things are just traditional, a lot of concepts, a lot of ways we see our family, we see our communities, the way we socialize among one another are all based on traditional ideas. We are not flexible and present enough to construct a revolutionary culture, a revolutionary paradigm. We're not present enough to equate and critically analyze our situation based on what we're up against. We can only view our circumstance from lack of traditional values. We can only assess our situations based on how the traditions are falling apart. We can't even see our own, how we are progressive and how we react to a present day situation. We can't see the implementations of new technology, a new attitude, a new approach, a new paradigm, a new perspective based upon what is happening now. We can't even gauge it and measure it and see the value of it because we constantly are caught up into traditionalism, into trying to get back and keep traditions going and get back into traditions. And we have been in a tradition for the last 400 years of being a slave. The diet we eat is a traditional diet, but it's a slave diet. The music we sing is traditional music, but it's slave music. The stuff we watch on TV is traditional within our family because we've done this for years, for generations, for centuries. We've done this, but it's traditional. And it's slavery at the same time. And our tradition is slavery, and we are slaves to the traditions. We're not ready for a new approach. We're not ready to be present and to be in the moment and to cultivate and form ourselves based on what needs to happen now, based on what we're up against, because we're still crying over the traditions. We're trying to keep the traditions that we had going. And we're trying to find traditions that we had 100,000 years ago in a world that was not modernized as it is today, in a world that was not technologically advanced as it is today, in a world that has not progressed in so many different ways as the world we live in today, and we're still trying to revamp and find out and discover and dig up traditions from 1,000 years ago, so we can pretend to act them out as though we can know and interpret them and act as though they're relevant to what's going on in the present moment for us today. We're scared of those who break against the tradition, that are anti-traditional. We fear those who will not submit to the traditions, and we say we won't change. But anyone who goes against the tradition, we see as an enemy or as an immediate threat. If your traditions were made up in slavery, if your traditions were passed on to you from those that were slaves, those who were in the matrix, those that were unconscious, those that are under white supremacy, if your traditions were passed on by them, or your traditions were some remnants of what was going on then if the world must change, if your condition must change, if the state of black people must change, then so must the goddamn traditions be changed. And the whole conscious community is leading you in either two directions: tradition or liberation. There are traditions that they have in jail. The Muslims have traditions. Their prayers traditions. Their whole religion is tradition. Religion is sometimes more tradition than spirituality, as I said with the church. The master will let you have your traditions. Don't confuse tradition with freedom, tradition with liberation, and tradition with empowerment. Because true empowerment would allow you to create your own culture out of scratch, to embrace a new culture, a new reality, a new paradigm from scratch. That's relative and conducive and productive, and that's based on the agenda that you set forth from this particular moment, that you are empowered to do so. But in the empowerment to do so goes against all tradition. Because traditions only give you one option, that's to follow them. Traditions only give you one option, is to go along with them. But to be in a moment to invent and create something new, to pioneer something new, you got to give away all the traditions. So many family traditions, traditions within your household. The whole educational process and system for us is nothing but a tradition, because we're not getting the jobs, we're not getting the employment, we're not growing economically, we're not taking over with the amount of education that we have, what we're getting from them. So why are we doing it? Because it's a traditional thing to do. It's traditional value. How many traditional values are going to have to be broken till we're able to become liberated? Till we're able to become revolutionary? When you revolt, you're going against all the traditions. Everything that is representative of your enslavement, of your stagnation, of your lack of progression, of a prior state to you being free, you're going up against everything that is anti-freedom. Any construct that was not directly representative of your freedom, you must do away with it. And that's scary for some people. So it's black tradition versus black liberation. And we've got to look back and say that some of these Africans were not liberated, that the culture that you talk about that the Africans had before we came over here, a lot of times was just not the highest culture. They had not ascended to the highest level of consciousness that you can reach, to never be enslaved, be under the white man, and to have the type of rulership that cannot be destroyed or desecrated by the white man. They had not come into that enlightenment, but they had traditions and they had spirituality and spiritual systems that were not strong enough to stand against white supremacy, colonialism, white imperialism, white supremacy. They just wasn't strong enough to do it. And you're going back, reaching for something that was ineffective to keep you from getting to the moment that you are now, versus really being in the moment that you are now, assessing the situation and coming up with a cultural paradigm and a reality and a revolutionary construct that's going to allow you to become progressive in the situation that you're in now. But in order to do that, you must counter tradition in many ways. You must go against these traditions. And some people's idea, their ultimate idea of freedom, is to put together some tradition that we practiced before slavery. The ultimate objective of freedom is intelligence. Intelligence is responsive, it's present. We have the ability to construct and build and establish something right now that is perfect for us, that reflect and represent where we're trying to go and how we're trying to evolve as a people. Our people fighting over traditions. We're getting killed in the streets. We're not even in a position of power to even determine what our culture is going to be or where we at in white supremacy. We got to send our children to their schools, and they got department and code enforcement and this, that, and you got to do this, and if you don't do that and cut your grass this and do that, how are you even in a position to even revisit tradition when you're under cultural imperialism? So you need a culture, you need a way of life that's specifically built to fight against cultural imperialism of white supremacy. And in the height of the traditions that we try to revisit, we were not confronted with cultural imperialism in the way we are now. That's why Africa is changing. Africa itself is becoming non-traditional because it's confronted with colonialism right now. Neocolonialism is confronted with white supremacy. They can't even keep the goddamn traditions that we forgot about. And they have to get on down to the modern times and be proactive and be ready and present to deal with the situation that's going on today that's confronting them. They have to be. Us, we want to go back. It's all about tradition for us. And we wonder why we're such a small circle and such a small group of people. Because that's what it will turn to when it comes to only keeping a particular tradition going versus the liberation of the masses of the people. Which is not about traditionalism, it's about humanitarianism today. It's about humanitarianism today. It's about the value of black human life today. It's saying, you know what, black lives matter, not black tradition matters. I'm going in.